Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we work on Django apps. We're going to continue. This is actually part 4 of an app series on building a totally new software as a service called Journey Inbox, and it's an online journaling service. We're going to continue with building it all out. The entire point of this project is every line of code will be streamed live for your benefit to see. So come along with us and join in. Feel free to use the chat. You can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. But it's mostly about the process of seeing a real app in person, one that will go all the way from nothing to completely out there and able to be signed up for and subscribed to and benefiting other people. So that's the plan. We're going to do some modeling tonight. We're going to build out the core models of the system. And I thought before we did that, we should get into some ability to visualize the system. Hey, John, thanks for joining in. Good to see you here. So I want to be able to visualize the system. This is a useful tool for you if you're using a Django application as well. And we'll do a little bit of work to see that. And then we'll go ahead and create the first core and maybe probably the only core model, to be absolutely honest. The application that we're building is not got a lot of different data models which map to database tables if you're not familiar with Django. But there's not a lot to this modeling in this particular application, but we'll be able to visualize it in the context of other stuff. So we'll start with this model visualization stuff, and then we'll get that going. We'll build the new model, then we'll update our visualization to see how it works, how it looks after that. All right, so there is a package which I've used extensively in the past called django-extensions. And there it is. Well, this is the job scheduling section. But Django-extensions is a cool project that provides a bunch of extra functionality on top of Django, as the name implies. And we're going to use that for our app to make sure that it will work. So let's get this installed. Let's get some other pieces installed that are going to be needed for our visualization stuff. And then we will actually get our first visualization out of this. So what I need to do is get Django extensions, and I don't know the latest version. So let's go to PyPI, search for Django extensions, and we found that it is version 3.2.3. So let's go over to our source file. I don't want to put this in the development file. This is actually going to go in the main file because I might use it for other purposes later, which we can talk about. So I'm going to come down here. Oh, that's the homeschool project. Wrong project. Sorry. Requirements.in, and we're going to go here and put Django extensions. And that's 3.2.3. Okay, so I'm using pip tools as a reminder. So we need to compile this in order to get the updated requirements.txt file. So you can see we have that here, and so it installed Django extensions. It looks like Django extensions doesn't depend on anything else, so there's no other packages that will come along with that. That's okay. So then we can do pip install. We're going to get our new package there. All right, so that's step 1 for actually installing the extensions. We're done with PyPI for now. So we've pip installed it, as they said, and we've done it in a way that is actually going to make it part of the application. That's why we built it into the requirements file. We don't need to go from source code, but we do need to add Django extensions to our installed apps list. And that's going to be important because the Django extensions tool provides a number of features, but they're not going to be visible to Django by default unless we do some work there. So if I run manage py-h, you can see there are just these sections. Django extensions is going to add a bunch of additional commands. We're actually going to use one of them in just a moment. So let's go to the settings file and add to installed apps. We'll put it right in where I put all the third-party apps. We'll put it at this point of Django extensions. Now, if I go and run that same manage command that just listed out all the commands, we should see a new set here. And we do. It's quite a few of them, actually. So Django extensions is the thing that's adding all of these new commands. That's pretty cool. Let's continue on, and I don't think that there's any other configuration we have to do out of the box. I think that's it. So we need to go now to the command that I want to use, and that is this one right here, graph models. So graph models, what it does is it scans your Django project. It looks for all of the models that you have in your project for any particular app that you list, and then it will render them into a graphiz file. That's a formatting thing for visualization stuff. It's not the prettiest visualization, got to be honest, but it will allow us to get a picture out of this ultimately that we'll be able to see. So we can do, looks like you can even configure it with some settings, which I didn't really realize. That's kind of cool. So maybe we should use that, because in the past what I've done is I've set this at a command right here, and I've just updated that. So this is a different way to do it that affects the default settings of which apps you want to use. That's kind of cool. Let's see. I wonder how these translate to the flags that are there. That's the part that I don't know. So we'll just continue to do the way I've been doing it in the past, and that should be fine. But if you wanted to play with this yourself, you might be able to go to your settings file and add this graph models section and see what we get. Let me pause and read this and make sure that there's not like an easy way to do what I want to do. Because if the critical part is we need to get this rank dir flag option, and if that doesn't show up in this dictionary of attributes, then I don't know that we actually get the benefit that I want. So let's scan through here if they have more examples. They do have a lot of examples, but they're all ways to call it. So we'll start with the command that I know, get it working, and then maybe work backwards and see if we can move it into the settings configuration so that I don't have to have such a complicated command to invoke it. So here's my call from my previous homeschool project, which is we're going to use something similar, and then we're going to trim this down for the Django apps that are relevant here. So step one is to uncomment this stuff. And what remains consistent between my last application and this one is that we're still using an accounts app, and we're still using a core app. Those two things are going to remain the same. So I'm going to keep them, and then we can get rid of these other apps because they're not there. John, let me look at your question. I can look at it, but you have used the admin generator from the Django. I have not. I don't actually know what the admin generator does, John. We can take a look at that in a second. It'd be interesting. Quietly, welcome. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining in. So I know that this is going to fail right out of the gate, most likely, because we don't have one of the prerequisites that is defined on this page. It says at the top that you need to have one of these graphiz libraries. So I just want to see what that failure is, if it's actually a good message or if it's something really obscure. So we've got our makefile target updated. We should be able to go over here now and type make graph, and it can say, oh good, it is a good message. So it says neither py_graphiz nor py.plus could be found to generate the image, to generate the text output, and then we don't want the text output. So next step is to actually have the py_graphiz installed. That was actually, I had even put that in the issue. So we've added Django extensions and we've configured it, and now we need to add py_graphiz. So let's go over and make sure we find the latest version of py_graphiz. And it's just a Python library to interface with graphiz programmatically, I think. All I know is that it's a prerequisite that doesn't come as a hard dependency for Django extensions, because Django extensions doesn't want you to have to force you to install things that you don't need, but this is an optional thing that's being added on top. So we've got 1.11 here. Let's try that. Now we might run into some problems, we'll see, because it requires a C library here that may cause some issues. So let's find out how much pain this is going to create for us. Okay, Django extensions, and then this graph models command will only be needed for development mode. So I only want to put this in the requirements development file. So we can go here and we can go and say right here, py_graphiz, and what was the version? 1.11. And let's see if this actually installs. This might We might have some linking problems where, well, let's just see. Do pip. I'm going to install this. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Okay. So what's happening here is Graph is, it requires a C library in order to actually, or some C code in order to create the necessary bindings to use this Graph stuff. And so I have already installed the appropriate GraphViz C library on this package or on this machine, but the local stuff doesn't have any visibility to it. And this, without getting too deep into this, this is like really like C level stuff. I'm just going to, I should have something here. No, it's not load, it's C, yeah. So there's different flags you can use. And so you can, what you can see out of this is essentially we're going to tell the C compiler, hey, there's an additional place to look for the certain C files that are needed here. Frankly, this cgraph.h file. If that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry too much about it. So we need to tell it where an H header file is, and also the associated library file. That's what these two, the C flags and the LD flags are there for this. Otherwise, this command should work. So we might need to update this. I don't know if Homebrew has installed a newer version than sim.05, but if this doesn't work, then, nope, that works. So I must have updated that recently. So that's the command that gets that to go. Again, I can put some, maybe I can put some notes here to actually go do this so that I can remember this in the future. Let's take this whole line, copy it, and let's put it in the README file. This is maybe for your benefit. I'm not going to format it precisely for your use, but it should help you if you want to try. So let's say local development tools. And then I'm just going to drop in that very line that we just had. It'll be good enough for somebody to follow along. So if you're having trouble, look for these C flags, find out where your GraphViz header files are installed and your library is installed, and then do the pip install command. What this essentially is doing is like changing the environment variables before the actual pip install command runs. And it gives visibility to these extra directories so that when the C compilation is happening, it can search for these additional files. So that's what's going on there. All right, let's try this again. So let's try make graph, see how it does. Now there's no error that time, and then we got a clean output, so we should be able to open a models PNG file here. What is this in the background? Oh, that's Streamlabs stuff. Okay, don't need that. All right, so we're in a nice little spot here where we don't actually have a lot yet. This is exactly what I would expect. Really, the only thing that we have is that user model that we added previously. We've not done a lot from the accounts. We haven't even added the account model. So we're working from the very, very basics of a Django project here. And so when we add our model a little bit later, we'll see that work in action. All right, so what would happen, though, if we modified this to take out these two apps and ran it again? Let's see. So need one or more arguments for app name. So this is where I'm going to try that graph models settings that we saw in the configuration. See if we can put this in here. We say graph models and then use app labels like that and see if we can get it going. Also curious that I was able to find that using accounts and core, even though it's really named like journal.accounts and journal.core. I don't know how it managed to resolve that. That's curious. So let's go over here, get rid of the README, go to the settings file again, and come down to the bottom. And this is where we'll put another third-party configuration here. So I'm going to add a new section. This will be for django-extensions. And we'll paste in that chunk of code that we got. And I'll save it. And so it's going to, black is going to reformat this. And then we can say accounts and what was the other one? Core. So now we should have those two, and with any luck, it'll make that previous command work. Yeah. Now we're back to that state where we can open our diagram again and see that we're back to this. That's cool. All right, so what about this other rankdir BT thing? Rankdir BT is an option that gets passed to Graphviz itself for determining how the ordering is. And that seems like a kind of like, what does that mean? And I would understand if you're confused by it. It's basically where the things are going to lie as in terms of top or bottom, and the order of the models in the file. What I have found is that the default, and it's not really noticeable here yet in this configuration, but the default is pretty confusing. In my other project, my homeschool application, there's a big tree of information where at the root of it, you start as a school, and then you have school years and courses, and it goes all the way down and forms a gigantic tree that everything relates up to the top. In the default rendering mode, it actually flips all that. So the tree is more like a natural tree, but it's not how you might think of it. So, or might want to visualize something. So it would put that root thing at the bottom, and then everything looks like kind of cascades up. And I find that harder to visually understand, because where the thing that has the most most common and has the most meaning is put at the bottom. So I like to flip it so that the thing that's most common, that is like the core concept of the system, is right at the top, right where your eyes are first scanning down. So by positioning it in that way, you get a better understanding for your system, in my opinion. So let's try and take that option off and see how it will affect this diagram. If anything, it should put the user above the abstract user, I think. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the abstract user case, but this will make more sense in the future. So let's try removing this, and we'll run the same make target. And then we'll open the file again. And you can see it's flipped. But I don't want that. So let's try and move that rank directory stuff into that configuration file. Let's see if we can get the benefit of that and see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll go poke at the code a little bit. I don't mind doing that. So it's either going to be rankdir or it's going to be rank_dir. We'll poke at either option. And we'll set it to BT and just assume that that's what it wants. Again, I could be wrong, but we'll wait and see. So let's do these in one fell swoop now. So we want to make the graph and then open it immediately. Whoops, that was not the name of the models, not model. Okay. Okay. All right, so that did do the right thing. So I think that enables us to really dumb down this target command. In fact, I suspect we could even, there's probably even a way to just set the default for the output. That I doubt is going to be O, though. Let's look at the code, because why not? We have that power, and so we can go figure it out. Let's go into our virtual directory, our virtual environment, excuse me, and go to lib python 3.11 site packages, and then look for Django-extensions. It should be in here. Django_extensions, I guess. And now that we're in here, we should be able to find our management commands. So there's the management section. But you know what? I'm going to open up NeoVim right here, so we can do a little faster with the finding of files. Let's go to the graph models command. It's not paying any attention to that. Okay, forget that. Management commands, graph models. All right, so what was the thing? Graph models is the thing it's looking for. All right, allow defaults for arguments to be set in graph models. Each argument in self-arguments is a dictionary where the key is a space-separated arg and the value is the keyword of arguments. The default from settings is keyed as the long arg name with the -- removed and any underscore replaced with, or dash replaced by an underscore. Okay, so the long argument name for -o is output. So we should be able to go in here, and to test it out, let's go call this output, and let's give it a new name. So we'll say new models.png. call it that, and then come over here, and then we can drop that stuff. And now we're just running the graph models command. So make graph, and let's see what we've got. We've got, did we get new models? There it is, open new models. Cool, we've got exactly what we want. Okay, so to finish this off, let's do a couple of things. Let's change this back to models. I don't want to call this new models all the time, that would be confusing. And then we can say, let's document this. Generate an image of the models in the system. Okay, and then we can go over here and let's remove both, let's remove new models. And then we want to go to the git ignore file. And I want to ignore the models PNG. I don't want to commit that because it's going to change and like it's not something that I need to see that way. So what's the best place to put this? Is this really a Django stuff? I mean, I guess. No, I'll just start putting my own section at the bottom. So we'll have models.png here. And now it shouldn't be there anymore. So here's our whole set of changes. We've got that git ignore change. We've added the graph command. We've got the command for how to install it in case we need to install it in the future. And we've got Django extensions and that configuration, and then the new packages that we needed. Now, this is where we're going to, there's going to be a change that we're going to run into trouble with during CI. So I'm going to commit, show you the problem, and then we'll go fix it. So let's add this like so, and say add Django extensions for graphing the models, and that's for number what? 22. So we'll push that up, and the problem is going to become really evident, and you might even be able to think of what the problem is already, knowing the troubles that we had when we installed this. So let me, did I push? Yeah, I did. Okay. So we've got this change, and it's building that, and that's going to fail in a second. I'm almost positive, and I've actually put the thing that is the problem right here. So, well, I put it where it's going to be a problem, but I didn't put what the problem is. Let's go check out GitHub Actions. And boom, right on time, it failed. And here's the problem, is that we haven't told CI about the GraphIs library either. So we need to go and make sure that that gets installed in CI so that it can do the installation of the appropriate packages. Because for doing the test, it's got to install all the development requirements, and that PyGraphIs thing is one of those packages now. So I'm going to go borrow from my other project because it already had it. And we'll go over here and take this chunk and bring it into our new GitHub workflow. So we need to install it before we get to the Python package installation step. And I'm going to keep the same name. So it's going to be named like that. And we don't need any of the other packages yet, I think. Or, oh, it looks like I already broke them out of what's required for what. So here's what we're telling. We're telling the base operating system for CI to install these extra packages. And the base operating system is built on Ubuntu, which is a Linux, so it has access to apt. So we will install these 3 packages that are listed here. And I'm just going to trust that those are the same 3 that we need. This is the Python 3 development headers. So if you need to compile things with Python, you would need the development headers in order to build that stuff. And then we need the C headers. Again, this is all kind of C information, so it's a little bit extra If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. So we'll add this and get it going. Samaki, deploy it. I'm not quite ready to deploy. I'm not ready to pay anybody for a service that can't be used yet, but we will get to that point eventually, I promise. This is your first time with Django. Very cool. If you have any questions, let me know. We'll get to some modeling here in a second, so we'll get to some specific Django details. But we've just been poking around with visualization so far. So let's say add ability to compile GraphViz library. And I don't know if I got it right because CI is kind of finicky, so I'm going to push it up. And assuming it passes, then we'll go close issue 22 and we'll consider ourselves done. And then we'll move on to the actual meat of the subject for this evening, which is doing some modeling. All right, let's go look back at actions. There should be one running right now. It's going to take probably about half a minute, but that should have been running at least for a few seconds after I pushed. See how it's doing. I think it's already farther. Nope. Installing. I thought this would be. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, it got farther, and it worked. Didn't quite understand. Did I name those in a weird way? Ah. I did. Look at this. It's got two things called install packages. No wonder that's a little weird. Okay. So we'll say install OS packages, and then we'll install Python packages. That'll make that clearer for the future. We won't commit that right now, though. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's first close this issue. Go to this model visualizations. We made sure that it works in CI. And now we can close. We're done with that. Before we move on, I told you I was like kind of conflicted about what should we do about automatic updates from things that generate pull requests. And I think in the spirit of trying to show you all of the code that goes with a project, I'm going to continue to do this only on stream. So there was a pull request that I got this week that came from pre-commit CI, which will auto-update my configuration file with changes, which is really convenient. I don't have to think about it. And since it's all running pre-commit during CI anyway, if this is green, then you're pretty much good to go. So we can go look at the change really quickly. We can see that it changed a couple of things about Py upgrade and Django upgrade to different versions. And I could approve those, but who cares? It's me. Like I know what I'm doing here. I see my own stuff. I don't need to approve that, I think. And I'm going to say squash and merge. So now we've taken that change, and we can come back over here and we can pull it. Whoops. I think I did a mistake here. So I have unstaged changes. Fine. Git stash. Git pull. Git stash. Pop. Okay. So we have a appropriate history where we've got that new change, and we've got that pending change that is just for the CI task labeling. When do I normally update my pip CLI? Yeah, that's a good question, John. I actually don't. I don't bother. I'm using it's using the default algorithm now, and I just generally don't find that has helped me. Maybe that's not the purely safest way to look at it. That is one area where you could. It's very easy to make an argument that to control your build artifact completely, that you would want to pin that down too. So that's a fair critique of my workflow, but I just haven't felt a need for it. It's like it's one area where the instability is like so infrequently bit me that I'm okay not doing it. That's my rationale anyway. Okay, so let's move on to the next bit. Let's get some modeling done and get to the core of a system. So as a reminder, this application is all about journaling. And so we need to be able to track journal entries. So I sketched out what are the fields that I want here. We're going to add this. We're going to test it. We're going to create a Django migration so that it will update the database table. We should also probably put in an admin. Let's write all these things down because I'm going to forget. So let's say we've got going to add the model, test the model, add migration, and then add the Django admin for the model. That should be the full scope of this change to get everything that we need in order to be testing with some real data. Whoa, that was some funny formatting. So let's do a little bit here. Make GitHub happy. Let's do things to do. That should fix that weird funkiness. Cool. Okay, so along with this is a need for a place for this stuff to live. And I suppose I could put it in core, but from like a Django modeling philosophy, you're kind of encouraged to make fairly small apps. And again, apps are a component within a Django project. That's the easiest way to think of it. It's a place where you divide models and views and such things as that. So it's the kind of core unit that you have with grouping things in Django. So we need I think that we need a new Django app. And I was trying to think of what's the best name for this. The best name that I can think of is entries. It's kind of a clunky name. I've never been a fan of that, but I was just thinking about journaling, and a journal entry is the most logical name to me. So, and then the convention is to pluralize your app names from what I've seen in Django. So we'll call our Django app entries, and then we'll add it to the system that way. So let's do manage, start app, and create an app named entries. Now again, I like to have my apps in a single directory, so we've got entries at the top here. So I'm going to move entries into the journal package, which is a Python package. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the journal entries test file, because as a reminder, I never use that file. I always use a directory, and we'll go from there. So we'll clean that up in a second. We'll add that to the stage so that it'll become visible over here in my NeoVim setup. So now we should be able to go to the entries, and we need to start at the entries config and put it, because we've moved it down a directory into the package, this now needs to be journal.entries as the name for the app config. The other thing we need to do is go to the settings file. Oops, wrong settings file. The other settings file. And we can add this to our list of installed apps. While I'm here, I don't need this documentation string at the top. I know all of this stuff, and I know where to look up settings. So for me, this section is not useful. Let's go ahead and remove that while we're here. It should make it easier to look at the settings in the future. So coming down this way, we will go and continue to alphabetize and put this at journal.entries. Okay. So we've got our new entries app. We should be able to, I think if there's an easy way to list the app. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. And then we've got these other files. We're not going to do any views here today, so we're going to delete that because otherwise pre-commit's going to complain at me about having an unused import. We are going to use the models file, so we'll come back to this in a minute. And we're going to use the admin, so we'll also come back to this in a minute. So let's go to, well, you know what, let's maybe do this in a test-driven development style. Let's create a new directory called tests, and come in here and create, this needs to be a package. So I'm going to create an init.py file and save it. Oh yeah, thank you for the reminder. Add to graph is too. So let's come down here and we can say entries. Oops, entries. Thank you, John. So we've got this new test package, and then we can create a test models.py. And here's where we're going to test this stuff out. So let's say class test, and then I'm going to call this, should I call this journal entry or just entry? The challenge is that it's entry can also be a kind of a vague word. So there's a lot of ways that I don't really like. I'm not really in love with the term entry. But you know, maybe in my system, this app is going to be simple enough that I wonder, is this going to bite me? It's one of these times where it's like I can choose to be specific and get journal entry, and like it will always be unambiguous, but then you're always dealing with this extra like journal word thrown around everywhere. Or I can choose to be the more generic thing of entry, and then just deal with the case that I might have a naming conflict in the future. Code. Hey man, what is the scope of this project? Good question. This is a journaling app. The core idea of the journaling app is that you would sign up for the service, and the entire journaling app is intended to work via email. So you actually won't spend a lot of time on the site. You will get daily prompts via your email, and you would respond to the email, and it would be sent to the system, processed, and stored there. That on its own is like not great, but the kind of the hook, what makes this app more interesting is that every time you get one of those emails in your inbox, it will take a random past entry and show it to you, so that you can like review and be reminded of things you've done in the past, which is kind of the cool aspect of it. Yeah, log. That's an interesting name, John. I'm kind of torn on that one too, because logging is something that we may want eventually. I think I'm gonna stick with entry. I'm okay with that. Can't imagine this coming back to bite me too hard. Sign up will be free for a trial. So my intent, because it costs money to send. Well, there's a couple of aspects, and I don't remember if I have the pricing sheet available. I think I might have shown it in the past, or I may have just described it. But there's the cost of hosting this will be the cost of hosting on Heroku, which will be about $16 when you add in the compute and the database that's required. And then the cost of being able to send emails using the SendGrid account that the pricing level that I want to use will be about $20 a month. So those two things is I want to make a service that, since I'm going to be investing some money into it, that people would have to pay for it. It'd be too much charity from my part to make this just a free service for everybody, and then deal with the challenge of having users who may have interesting demands. Sam, am I going to track open emails? No, I'm not. To be honest, I want to. Over time, I've become more and more interested in like privacy. I'm not a hardcore privacy guy, just to be really clear. Like, but if there are simple things that I can do to not track people, like I have no plan to put Google Analytics on the site in any way. I have no plan to do user tracking of any kind. I'm just not interested in that. I want to make a service and like be committed to. I don't want your data. I don't want to know about you. And frankly, I think that's important, because this is a journaling app. And if I was feeling kind of like, I don't want to call somebody slimy who uses Google Analytics, because I've used it in the past and I use it on my personal website and stuff. But for this site, where it's about sharing, frankly, personally sharing some of your most intimate details, perhaps, like I don't want any impression that I care about any of that information, that I would use that for any other purpose aside to store it, to serve it back to you. So my point of view on this is that this is going to be kind of privacy focused. I'm going to be very transparent about that, saying like this is what this is about. So I will not be tracking open email because I don't know what I would do with it, first of all, and then secondly, this privacy aspect. Hopefully that answers your question, Sam. All right, so let's start with what I would need and what we'll need for the rest of the system. And for a lot of these test cases for models, I start with a test to check that I can have a working factory method. I've talked about factories in previous sessions, but as a reminder, factories are a good way to generate test data. So I'm going to make an assumption that a factory exists, produce an entry out of it, assert that it's got some content in it, and then that'll be that. And what it will do is, in a test-driven style, it's going to force me to build out all of the necessary attributes, and then build up the testing tooling so that I'll have that in the future for other tests that will need to use entries, which will be very common. How will my marketing work if I'm not going to be tracking customers? So this is where like I'm going out on this limb of like, this isn't about, for me, it's not about like building up funnels and knowing like how many people have I had. I mean, I may do a little bit of admin kind of interfaces of like, there's going to be an account model in the system. So at a given point, because I have to track statuses of the accounts of like, are you an active user? Has your membership expired and all of that sort of stuff? There will be some basic status tracking where I will be able to determine a crude funnel to say like, I have this many people that are in the trial right now, and I can know how many aren't going through and stuff like that. And then I could view how many times did you actually create an entry. I can have a without looking at the data for those journal entries, I can get a count of you did this every day for the 2-week trial. Maybe you're a good person that's going to sign up for this, or maybe you're not, and maybe there's something else wrong with the app that I need to dig into. So I think there are ways that I can do some kind of work towards the marketing end in terms of monitoring how successful I'm being. But that'll come down the road. Those are excellent questions. I appreciate the thought there, Sam. So let's see. We'll say a factory produces a valid journal entry. So here's where I'm going to just code the thing that I want to exist in the world, and then we'll work backwards. So we'll say entry is equal to an entry factory. And I think I said, so what are the attributes that we're going to need on this model? I've listed them here, but just as a reminder. So the primary interface, again, is email. I don't want to deal, because everybody's email clients has different formatting of what's this, what's that. So I'm going to store it this as raw text and just have a text field for the entries so that the mode of this app is you just reply. Don't worry about your formatting. The point is to get your thoughts out and put all that down. And then that's what will be stored here in the actual entry. I need to also store the date, because the whole point is to be able to associate and have like a chronology. It is a journal after all. And then I need to know whose journal entry this is. So there needs to be a foreign key to the user model, which is going to be how we'll look this up in the future. So those are the 3 critical fields that I'll need. And if we need more fields in the future, we can add them via migrations, but this is where I'm going to start. So I want to assert that the entry, let's say the entry body, I don't want that to be empty. So let's see, it's not equal to an empty string. And then I want to assert that the entry, well, what do I want to assert about when? I mean, I could do something as dumb as it's not none as a start. Or maybe I can do it that it matches up with today or something like that. Just help support and give feedback. Sign up when he goes online, at least for the trial period. Feedback is always good for the dev to make his product better. Yeah. Those are good points, John. Appreciate that. Yeah, we'll probably have there might be, if you've done a trial, there are ways to hook up to certain events via Stripe. So we can do a bunch of marketing things without being like super again, not slimy, super interested in privacy. So when a trial expires, we can connect to a Stripe event and hook into a webhook so that I could conceivably say, like, your trial expired. Would you mind sharing like why you didn't sign up for the service, just so we can help make the product better? And even if I only got like a response rate of 5% or less on those kind of things, it would help me know like where my product was deficient. So let's do this as the set of tests for now. We might, whoops, is not none. Okay, so this is going to fail because these things don't exist yet. So the first step is to bring in an entry factory. So we want to say from journal dot, let's restart the LSP because it's not picking up the new app. There we go. Now we should get entries. There we go. Tests, and then I put a factories file typically inside my test package, and then we can say entry factory. So my editor knows that that factories file doesn't exist yet. So let's bring up test models. Wrong directory, sorry. All right, let's come in here and make a factories file. And we need to import factory because we're using Django factory boy, or sorry, just factory boy, which we've used last time. And so we want to create a class called entry factory. And this is come from factory.django.django model factory. That's the thing that we need a subclass from in order to create a factory. And it needs to have a class meta. And let me go check my other one because I don't remember if I was putting the, okay, we didn't have any attributes yet. So putting class meta right at the top, which is good. So class meta, and this is to describe which model you care about. So we want to say model, and we want to use, you can either do the model directly, like using the actual model import, or you can use the string name that Django will know about. So this would be, in our case, entries dot entry. But again, that doesn't exist yet. So now we have a valid factory. So if I save this, it's going to say like, oh, I found it, hopefully. No, maybe not. Why did you not find it? There we go. Okay, so it found the entry factory, but it doesn't know about this thing yet. So the entries app doesn't have an entry model. But we're finally ready to actually go define the model. So let's do that. So let's go to entries, model, and we need to create our new model, which is going to be an entry. And you do that by pulling out the model from here, and an entry stores the user's writing for the day. I don't know. Not the greatest doc string, but that'll work. So that gives us a model. That gets us a little farther, but these attributes still don't exist. So now we have an entry thing, so it's correct in creating something here, but there's no body attribute yet because we've not put that on here. So we will start by putting a body attribute, and this is a models text field. And we've got that. So this assertion is probably still going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because by default, the text field is going to be empty. But we don't want our factory to just have an empty entry body. Instead, we can fill it with stuff. So let's bring out the factory boy documentation. Factory boy. And you can see how to use some certain stuff to your advantage. There's a way to get like a paragraph or multiple paragraphs of stuff. I'm drawing a blank. Fuzzy attributes, ... So let's look through this for a moment. These are just defining the attributes that actually go in the class. So there's a bunch of like helpers that come along with, what is it called? Like you can see here, there's fuzzy, lazy attributes, traits. We'll find it in a minute, I promise. And I know I recognize I'm scrolling pretty quickly, not even giving you time to look at this. Faker, that's the thing I was looking for. So we can say factory.faker, and then I think we can use like paragraph. There's Faker's a cool package for generating test data. Sometimes it's not quite deterministic, or it's too deterministic and causes collisions, but that's not really a problem here. So what I want to do, let's go back to that Faker section. Faker. And this is the library, so let's probably take us to the documentation for Faker. And there's different providers, but one of these should be like paragraph. That's what we want to, it's essentially what I'm looking for to go in this body. Mike, I'll get to your question in just a second. Appreciate the question. It's a good one. So let's go over here and we'll create a body attribute. And the way the idea behind factories is like you're essentially defining the recipe for any attributes that you want to fill on the particular model. So we've said we're going to stamp out different entries for our testing purposes. And anytime we need to fill in those things with data, we can use the rules that are provided as class attributes on the factory to help populate those things. So by saying factory.faker and then do paragraph, I think that will do everything we need. That should give us a paragraph of stuff over here. So now when we run this test, it's not failing at the body anymore. So in fact, let's see what it's producing, just out of curiosity. So I'm going to set it equal to an empty string and see what differences we get. And it's just junk. It doesn't make any sense, but that's okay. We don't need it to make any sense. So politics, close, necessary, growth, west, machine, truth, protect, none, least, under. Yeah, like it's completely meaningless, but it's enough to have some like real content. All right, let's fix that test, then we go read Mike's question. So Mike asks, is this a multi-tenant app? And if so, are you using any specific packages like Django tenants, or do you use a custom middleware, or do you use row-level security to separate customer data? That is a great question. My preference in these kind of systems is to use the row-level security that you're describing. And for others who are maybe not familiar with the options, and to be honest, I've not used Django tenants, but there are a lot of ways to implement security to separate like who's allowed to see what. On one of the features of Postgres is, oh shoot, what do they call it? Is it called database? Or no, it's called schema. So like a post, and this is different from what you might normally think of as I think of a schema typically as like a description of some model that you want to produce, like type information, all that kind of stuff. But a Postgres schema, let me make sure I'm not talking crazy, actually. Let's go look it up together. So a Postgres database cluster contains one or more named databases. Yes, but what's the schema? Yeah, Mike knows what I'm talking about. I'm trying to like explain for others who may be less aware, Mike, but creating a schema. Let's look for schema here. Is there a definition? Schema. A database contains one or more named schemas, which in turn contains tables. So one way of handling multiple users is at the most well, the very most extreme level is to have like complete different database instances for every customer. Maybe there's a world where that makes sense to you. I've never seen it. That seems like the management of that is kind of intense to me. This option with Postgres here is similar. It's a little, it's closer, but it's like saying within a single Postgres cluster or Postgres database setup, you can split like logically at this schema level, and each schema can have its own database table. It still leaves you with the same challenge of you have to keep, if you have multiple schemas per customer, you have to keep all of those schemas up to date with all of your tables. I suspect that's what Django tenants does, but I don't know. And the benefit of that is a lot of like security isolation. Like you could assume that in each, you might call it an enclave, but within each of those schemas, like it's all the customer's data. It's all kind of safe. You wouldn't have to do any extra checking per se. But what you would do is like using like a middleware or something like that, you would be routing so that anytime you use the Django ORM, you're connecting to the right schema for that customer. So that's one approach. The other approach that Mike has described here is about using row level security. And row level security is kind of what you can see when I showed you the GitHub issue. Apologies. Where what I'm going to be doing is I'm adding a column to the entries table to look up the user. So all of these journal entries are going to be in a single table, but I will be making sure that I'm only ever filtering on that particular user's data. So there's not the sharing across. And so that's how I'm planning to do security. When I've done this in the past, I've added tools that force me to think about authorization, and that has been a really helpful mechanism. So I'll probably do something similar here, actually with a package I wrote called Django Denied, which by default assumes like a pessimistic view of the world and tries to be take a security stance where you are denied access by default and everything has to be explicitly granted. We'll get to that a little later. I'm not really at the authorization level right now. I'm trying to work up to the modeling. Hopefully that answers your question, Mike. Okay, so we've got now a body that has a text field. We want an attribute that is when, and that's going to be a date time, not a date time, just a date field, because I'm only ever interested in did you make an entry for that day? That's the granularity that this app is going to work on. I'm not going to support like you can write multiple times in a day and I keep track. No, that's not my interest. Blah blah. Welcome back. Am I planning to use Django Unicorn? I'm not. I've never used it. I'll bring it up in case anybody's curious. Django Unicorn sounds like it is an opinionated layer on top of Django that does a bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, a magical full stack framework for Django. Honestly, don't know a lot about Unicorn. I've heard people say pretty decent things about it, but yeah, that's not my plan. So if you're looking for a more opinionated way to do Django, like you need a little bit more Rails to help you, to guide you, and maybe this is more like Ruby on Rails for Django, I don't know, then this might be a path to consider. Looks like it's got some built-in SEO. Yeah, I've not done a lot of deep work on it. Works like HTMX, interesting. I wonder how it's doing that, or what JavaScript is using. Is it using its own JavaScript, or is it using a particular tool? Do you know, blah blah? Your handle's hard for me to say clearly, blah blah. Okay, so we're gonna add a date field. I'm gonna set it, I'm not gonna set any defaults here. I'm gonna require, well, let me think. Should I set a default? It generates its own JavaScript. Okay, thanks for the context, blah, blah. So if I write this model this way right now, it means that anytime I create an entry, I'm going to have to explicitly set the date, which is not necessarily a problem. Like I can do UTC now.date, or there's another one that's in the utils package for doing time zone stuff that is like direct method for creating a date. Or we could use the auto use, and I think there's like some recommendation against it maybe. So let's go look at the Django documentation for, I want to do the modeling right, ideally, so I don't want to have to redo stuff. Let's take a quick peek, see what we can find. We're going to look for the date field, which should be in the model reference. Here it is. And date field right here. Okay. So we've got options here. So we automatically set the field to now every time the object is saved. Well, that's not what we want. Auto now add, automatically set the field to now when the object is first created. This is kind of what we want. For date field, it defaults to date.today from datetime date today. Maybe that's So here's where this is going to get challenging potentially. No, okay. I'm convincing myself that I don't want this. Here's why. I got it. All right. I got this figured out. The way entries are going to get created in the system is not because of somebody. I mean, we might provide a form for them to actually like do this online. In fact, I will probably want that. That's one of the. So I'm actually replacing a service that I currently use, and one of the things that I don't like about the service is that if there have been times where that service had downtime and didn't provide entries, and I can't go back and backfill those days. So I have a couple of entries in my current tool that I'm using where I wrote a bunch all at once. So I kind of saved them up in one date, and I kind of like, parsed it myself and said January 1st, January 2nd, that kind of. And that was annoying. So we probably will want to have the ability to create one in the future. However, the 99% case, if folks are actually using this heavily, is that it will come in through email parsing. So SendGrid is going to send information back to the site about the email that was sent. And it doesn't necessarily correspond to the day that is like today, right now, because it could be, and I'll give you an example. The way I use the service is I don't actually necessarily journal every day. Actually, in fact, I like to batch them up and like kind of write my journal entries at once when I'm like in a space where I can think about them. So what that means is, though, even though I got a prompt email for every day, and I can see that piling up in my inbox, I don't send them all until later. So that delay in time means like I wouldn't want my entry stored with Journey inbox to be when it was sent by the user. I want it from when I sent it to them. That makes sense. So that I can track the day that they were supposed to fill it in. So that means there's going to be some like parsing, and I presume that the envelope that's going to come with the SendGrid API response will include the date where the original email was sent. I'll be able to parse that and say like, okay, this was June 21st, and so therefore I'm going to create an entry for that day. Therefore, with all that being said, I do not want to have a default. I want to make it explicit so that I like have to conscientiously set the date for when these things get created. So I'm going to do this as a date field, and then I'm going to run the test, and it's probably going to blow up. And good, it's doing exactly what I want. So it's saying you cannot have a null on this field. So we have to set something in the factory. That's what's missing here, in case you're curious. Let's go back over to our factory, and let's go back over to our factory boy documentation, because I don't actually remember how to set dates. So we can set it with faker, Are there other ways of setting dates? I just want like a today. Yeah, here's what I want. Lazy function. Yeah. And what did Django say it was going to default to? Datetime.date.today. Yeah, that's what we want. So we want to go over here and we want to use when, and we'll say factory. We want to use a lazy function. So if we're doing our attribute access, oops, lazy function, and we provide it a callable that we want to use at the time when it's being evaluated. So that's going to be datetime.date.today. Now, there's a chance that we might get a failure here, a warning from the system, because we're doing everything in UTC and it might not like this date object created by that. So let's see. So first we need to import datetime. Okay, it did not seem to complain with that. Let's make sure if we run PyTest over here. Nope, okay, cool. So we now have entries that have a date, and then finally we need to have a reference for that security that Mike was talking about earlier. We need to have a reference to the user so that when we're looking up entries on who to display things for, we're only going to get the user's entries. And that's really critical for when we actually send them prompts to. We don't want like send somebody else's random entry. That would be horrible. So we need this as well. So we're going to have a foreign key. And here I'm going to use the string naming of this. What are the attributes? Oh, come on, Django. Or come on, LSP, it's not figuring that out. So you can start by saying the name, and that's going to be the account's user. That's what we want to link to. Yeah, I think that's going to be best because when somebody's authenticated, we're going to be able to look this up by user. So will I have to check for nulls or blanks to show a number of unsent emails? You know, John, I haven't really considered how I'm going to track if I've made sure to send the user an email every day. That is a good, like, accounting question that I'm sort of honestly not thinking too hard about yet. We should think about it, but I don't know that I'm ready to dwell on it too much right now. I think what I want to do, probably let's be optimistic first, and not to say that you're pessimistic, but I think your question is good, but let's just assume that everything's going to work, and then once we have a baseline working, then we can kind of like backfill and put in the extra. I need to ensure consistency and guarantees and so on and so forth. So we have our accounts, which I see I've spelled incorrectly with 3 C's. That's not right. So we've got a user model that we're going to need, and then there are other attributes that are required for foreign keys, and frankly I forget what they are. So let's do it like this. There we go. Telling us. See, I guess I won't know about draft mode, John, because somebody has to hit send on their email client. So if they have a draft, I can't know that. So we need an on-delete behavior. On-delete is going to describe what to do when this foreign key is deleted. So if we delete a user, let's say, again, wanting to have a privacy-based service, when a user closes their account, I want to give them the option to delete all their information forever. Or maybe that'll just be the default. I don't know. So when that happens, I need to go back and clean up after them. So when the user is deleted, the on-delete argument here tells Django how it should treat the entries related to that user, because there are going to be multiple entries. So I want to do, what I want to do is a different one of the modes that's here, and I want to say cascade. So by saying cascade, we're essentially saying when the user gets deleted, as that's figuring out what else to delete, go ahead and cascade, continue on, and delete the entries as well, so that it all gets cleaned up. Okay, so there's that. And then we want, I guess another attribute that I want to include is the related name. Related name is if we want to do a reverse lookup of like the fact that this is a foreign key. Every time we have a user object in the ORM, we'll be able to access the entries via this related name. So it attaches something called a related manager, and you could say user, and the default would be entry set. It's whatever the model name is, underscore set is the default. So that would be user.entryset.all would give you all of the entries related to that user. But we can give it more natural names by using this related name keyword argument. So I'm going to call it entries and do like this. So I added that comma so that it would start, that black would format and go in this vertical way here. I think that that's going to be enough to make this test pass. But it's not, because we need one more thing on our factory. So there is no user here, and the factory doesn't know how to make a user right now. So this is where Factory Boy gets awesome. It's one of my favorite aspects of it. It's the idea of subfactories. So we need a user object, but we don't have a user object. And creating a user object would require, hey, Loren, welcome. Long time no see. Thanks for joining in. So we need a user object. And one way to do that would be to call user.objects.create and pass in all the parameters. But most of the time in a test, we don't care about all of those informations. We just want attributes. And we don't want to redefine every attribute that goes in the user. But luckily, we've already created for ourselves a user factory. So you can refer to another factory within a factory. So they kind of tree up together, which is really great. So by doing user equal factory dot subfactory is the thing that we're after, and then we give it the factory that we want to be able to use. Again, this could be directly importing the factory and providing it here, or you can pass in, I believe it's the module path to the factory. Let's try that. So I think it's something like, in our case, it would be journal.accounts.test. Ugh, this is kind of gross feeling. I might want to do the import here for this. Dot user factory. I think that's what we need. Let's try that, see if I'm right. And if not, oh, okay, cool. So hopefully that makes sense. So it's using, so it gets to that user attribute, says like, I need to be able to satisfy the foreign key relationship, which expects a user. Let me go ahead and create a user object. I'm going to use this other factory to stamp out a user object, and then I'm going to connect that together and to satisfy the foreign key relationship. All right, let me read Mike's question here. Mike says, I'm curious, is there a good way to archive the users that cancel and have a retention policy so they can log in at a later date and still have their data available? That is an excellent question, Mike. There's a yes. The short answer is yes. The slightly long answer is how would one do that? And the natural way to do that, from my perspective, is to reach for a technique called soft deletion. And I want to say, I'm looking here because I want to say that Django-extensions has a soft delete option. Django-extensions is full of cool goodies, and I thought one of them might be helpful in this way, but maybe I'm misremembering. here are some database model extensions, like basically classes that you can use to get some cool stuff, like auto. Like, so let's say you need a model that always has created and modified, and those are super common attributes, so you can use one of those things. But I'm not seeing it here. Maybe I'm remembering some other Django package. But let me just stop. The idea behind a soft delete is that you don't actually do the delete from the database table. Instead, you incorporate a status attribute, and you have it as either like active or deleted. And when somebody closes their account, you would soft delete the user, which basically says, I'm going to keep all your stuff around. And then at some period after that, maybe you soft delete and maybe you log a record of this is when this user left. This is the retention period of how long we'll keep the data. And then after that retention period time, we'll look for any soft deleted users that are beyond that retention window and then do the actual hard delete on them. So that is a mechanism for doing that. I'm kind of torn whether I want to do soft delete or not. I might just be very clear on the messaging of, hey, this is really, really going to delete your data because we're really serious about privacy. So that's how I'm thinking about it currently. But I might consider it if everybody's like, no, you need soft delete, then we can think about that. Yeah, something like you're mentioning there, Loren, of having a deleted field in the user table. Yeah. So it's either like that kind of naming or like a status column. So we can revisit that if we want to. Oh, here's maybe one. Activator model. Yeah, maybe this is the one I was thinking of. It's got a status field that's an integer. It has active or inactive. And there's a custom manager that will only get you the active stuff by default, perhaps. Or maybe you always have to use active. I don't know. It's one of those things. I didn't currently write the user model to do that, but I also haven't deployed this anywhere. So if we want, the nice part about, we have not deployed to production yet. So none of our database design is locked in yet. In the future, once we've actually launched production, we have to do migrations after that point. I mean, there are probably ways around that, like monkeying with history, but really you have to lean on migrations. But if we wanted to, we could like make a change to the user model, go delete the migration, and then just create a new one, because nothing live is using this yet. And that's the benefit of having not deployed. The downside of that approach is that, well, it's longer before you get your product out, and there's risk that comes along with actually not doing the deploying and getting all that stuff ready. So I'll think on that. In fact, let me write it down. I think on, should we allow for soft deletion of users? Is there a way to vote on GitHub issues? Probably. So if you all feel strongly about it, go leave a comment. This is an open repository. I'm trying to do all this work in public. You can go to github.com/mblayman/journal. Check out all the issues that I've been writing here, and let me know what you think. Please, just like you're being in the chat, please be civil. I trust y'all to do that, and we can have some good chat about the things that are there. So if you have questions about the things that are coming up in the future, I can happily try and answer them, and we can be more prepared for some of these streams. Soft deletion, whoops, with a retention period may be a good thing when somebody closes their account. Okay, made sure to capture it so we don't forget that idea. Let's look down here and see where we're at. So we've got good question. How do we set a timer for the hard delete? All right, let's go back to Django extensions. There's some cool stuff in here, guys. And the one that I would call out in this case is job scheduling. So you can, and we'll set this up. This will be how, in fact, I send the emails out, the prompts via SendGrid. I'm going to use this job scheduling technique so that we don't have to set up a long-running background worker. Background worker wouldn't be that expensive. It'd probably be about $5 or so worth of compute a month, but I just don't need it. I don't need to keep a processor running around for a long time, so why waste it? Instead, we can set up a job, and the job can run at some frequency, and every time it runs, maybe it's hourly, maybe it's daily, I don't know, it would check for something in the database. So the technique that I've done in the past with other stuff is we record some kind of datetime field on a database table. So let's say the user did close their account, and at that moment of close, I either set an attribute on the user model, or I create a separate record of pending account deletions, or something. We would pick a name that would record that datetime. The job here, all it would do is periodically wake up, say, what time is it now? And let me find anything that is older than right now, or minus 60 days, or whatever the time period is that you want for that retention window. Look for anything that's beyond the retention window, and then finally do the delete. So it's a very kind of crude mechanism. I just wake up, look for something, and then do the work if it applies, and then stop. So that's pretty simple mechanism, but it's a surprisingly effective one, and it works if you don't have any like real-time requirements. Like you wouldn't want to do this hourly task if you had something like, let's say the sign-up flow that I've got. Right now, that sign-up flow is sending an email during sign-up, as it's just calling out to the SendGrid API, or will be calling out to the SendGrid API to send that. You wouldn't want to send that hourly, because then that leads to a bad user experience for the people who are trying to sign up, and you want to like leave a good first impression at sign-up, so you definitely don't want to delay there. So definitely don't use it for things where a user is expecting a response right away. But if it's something that they are done and they're not really thinking about the retention window, they just want to keep track of it for later, then this would be a fantastic way to do that with a daily thing. Yeah, right, Lauren. Have a TTL based on the time since deleted. Yep. Bingo. Okay, so let's finish up this this journal entry thing. So we now have the model. We've tested it. We have not done the migration. Oh, interesting. You'd move them to an archive table. Yeah, I'm curious if you'd speak more to that. I'm curious of what would be the intent of moving them to a separate table after the retention window? Is it the thought that they might come back beyond then? I would assume that if they're closed their account and it's like plus 90 days and they haven't come back, then they are gonzo. Yeah, time to live setting. Okay, so we need to do a migration, and we need to do the admin. Okay, for resurrecting the users. I gotcha. Yeah, I think it sounds like you're nicer than I am, Lauren. I figure if they've left, I will probably make it. So one of the features I want to put in the app, did I put this? I didn't put every feature that I was thinking of, but long term, there will definitely need to be an ability to get all of your stuff out. So we need like an archive page. The user should be able to download all of their entries. The stuff that the service that I'm using actually has this feature, and I was surprised. I used it just to see what the payload would look like as I was thinking about this project, and it ran synchronously, and then I thought, like, hey, you know what? That's actually not a bad idea. Like I've been using the service. So for those who haven't been joining me, in the last few sessions. This is going to be a clone of a service that I'm currently using, but it had some reliability issues if wanted me to create a clone of it, and partly to like show you all a new SaaS project, but also to put me in control of that reliability and make it my problem, which I would feel more comfortable with. Anyway, they have an archive feature and where you can download all your stuff. And I've been using this service for 7 years, so a long time. And I clicked the download my archive thing, and it gave me a JSON file. It was a big JSON file. It was like a megabyte, but in the scheme of things, that's tiny. And so it wasn't a task. It didn't take a lot of processing. So it's really easy to get out. So I want to have that same kind of capability of like, if you want to take your data, like I don't want to hold anybody hostage with their journal. So it needs to have that ability. So we're going to definitely have this at some point. All right, I keep getting distracted from what we're doing. So let's get back to that. So we need a migration, and then we need to have the Django admin so that we can view this stuff. Again, from a privacy perspective, I don't want, this is like not something I would ever plan to be using in a production setting unless somebody's reporting that they're having a problem, like maybe there's some kind of UTF-8 character that I'm not supporting for some weird reason. I need to inspect their journal entry that's going wrong, but I would never anticipate using that for real people's data. But as a development tool, it's really handy to be able to like whip up some data that we'll be able to test against. So that's my primary desire for wanting an admin here. Okay, so we've got all of this stuff. We have, let's go ahead and add that to the stage. Let's make our migration. So I'm going to run make migrations, and it should only make one for that new entry model. There we see it. And that got stored in this migrations directory, and I'm going to come in here anyway because I'm going to save this so that Black will run on this. And you can see that this is just, this is not SQL. So what Django does is it creates this migration file, which is a Python representation of the state that you want. And then it takes the database engine that you want to use and will do the necessary SQL DDL, the data definition language, for table creation or table modification based on whether you're using SQLite or Postgres or MySQL. So it's a sort of describing the abstract of what is needed. So we've got our 4 fields here. This one is one that I didn't define. This comes automatically when you are doing Django models. It's a big auto field. This might be, let me think for a second. What I'm trying to think through, is should this be a different kind of ID field? And I think my answer is no, because when a user looks up their own entries, because we have this uniqueness constraint around this being a date field, we can do lookups on that date field. So we don't need an ID to give a unique identifier because this will be the ID. Oh man, John, I don't even want to think about GDPR yet. Yeah. That'll be interesting to be what compliance would require for that. Okay. So we now have a migration. We can run our migrations by running the migrate command. And that had some social account stuff that we haven't run, but it also included our entries model here. So at this point, we could bring up a shell. There's 2 ways. I'll show 2 ways to do this. We could either bring up the shell this way. This is the standard way that comes with Django. And from here, I could do from journal entries models import entry. And then we could create an entry this way, if I could type. Or here's another cool thing that comes with Django extensions. You can use shell _plus. And so what that does is it looks through all the apps that you have and automatically imports all the models, which is awesome. Bello, you're not too late. Welcome. I mean, you've missed some stuff, no doubt, but I've got a recording going and I'll get this posted. We're working on the main model for this app right now. So thanks for joining in. So you can see the shell plus technique brings in all the stuff. So you don't have to do the necessary imports. So it says right here what it does. It's also importing some like convenient stuff. So you have quick access to your settings. You have quick access to a bunch of things that if you like usually when you're bringing up the shell, it's because you want to do some things with the ORM and do some various queries. So common things that you might use with the ORM are automatically imported. Dates, you can see what's here, but it's super cool. So we could have just now immediately used the entries technique here, but I don't want to do this. This is not how I want to create the first entry. I want to go through the admin because the admin's a much nicer experience. So what we're going to do now is go to the admin site, and I'm going to rack my brain for a minute on how to do this because we need an admin. So we're going to say entry admin. Oh, Nitin, thank you for the nice comment. I appreciate that. I try my best to, I assume everybody is at their own level of experience with how they do web development. Some folks clearly have a bunch of experience that we've seen tonight, and others don't, and that's okay. The whole point of this is to like let everybody come along for the ride as much as possible. So we're going to use a model admin, and I think this is enough to start. So I'm going to list a pass there. So you create this admin class, but that alone is not enough. Like if we started up the local web server and looked at the Django admin right now, we would not see enough. Instead, we have to tell the admin site where this admin page is. You kind of have to hook these things together. And the easiest way to do that is with a new, well, it's not new anymore, but it's a decorator that not everybody knows to use. Okay, John, let me look at your comment here. The entry table should not have the user ID field to filter user entries, since it will be on the many side. Oh, yes. Let me make sure. I think I understood what you're saying. Let me read it one more time. The entry table should not have the user ID field to filter users' entries, since it will be on the many side. I think you're saying like use the raw ID field. Is that what you're trying to say, John? I might not be grokking exactly what you're going for. So we're using admin register, and then we say entry as the model we want to register. So you're essentially connecting the admin page configuration with the model that you care about. Entry is not defined here, so we need to import that. So I'm going to do a relative import since we're within the app. It's one of the techniques that I have picked up over the years that I've found is nice on the very rare occasion that where you like need to move directories. Using relative imports for inside a Django app is a clear way to indicate what you're caring about. So this is saying that this entry admin is now connected to the entry. And just doing that alone should probably give us some kind of display on the admin page. Let's go take a look. We haven't actually started Django this entire time. We've been deep down in the code. That's okay. So we want to bring up port 5000. And, well, we have no page there yet. Or I made a page so that it wouldn't fail, but it's completely empty. And we're going to use the admin, which I still haven't corrected the URL to. Somebody, 2 weeks ago, somebody gave me the recommendation to, I remember, I got it via email. Somebody gave me the recommendation to make this setting configurable via an environment variable. So we talked about how the admin is not a name that you want like out there. Like it is, if you have admin/, it's a pretty clear tell that you're a Django site, and kind of opens you up to script kiddies and stuff, people who have made automated scripts that try and exploit these kind of things. So it's highly encouraged to choose a different name. Now, security through obscurity is what that technique is generally called when you just try and pick a different name that people can't discover, is not, I repeat, is not the best way to do security. but it is a better than nothing approach. It's certainly better than just sticking with the default. It's like being almost like if I had named it PHP admin. If you, for those of you that have like looked at attack logs and things. Okay. I always forget the username and password. Thankfully, I added this to the README because I was tired of forgetting that. Let's go look at the README for what I called this. Okay, so the username is Matt and the password is create horse. Create horse. I think I spelled that wrong. Create horse. There we go. And look, we have our entries thing right here. Now notice right away, Django is trying to be helpful by pluralizing this, but it got it wrong because entries has an irregular pluralization spelling. We can correct that. Not like we'd need to, but it's nice to like clean up a little bit of this stuff. So let's go to the admin reference. We can find it here. And Django admin document. I don't know which page it's going to be. Let's try the Django admin site. Let's see if this how exhaustive this thing is. So here it describes the register decorator that I just mentioned, and we want the model admin options. The pluralization thing might actually be on the model itself now that I'm thinking about it. Although the model admin might permit us to set it, I think it's a meta attribute, which are cool features of models for when you want to do extra stuff. But let me scan through here. Again, apologies. I know this is very jerky as I'm using my scroll wheel to look at this stuff. Oh yeah, listen, I would not be able to do this without looking at the docs. So this is, yeah, this is real life, man. How we do it. Okay, so we'll probably want list display in a minute. We'll come back to that. Gosh, what is the name of that attribute? My memory is failing me. Anybody know off the top of your head? Yeah, it's definitely on the class meta models. I think you're right, Bella. Let's look at the model meta. Model meta options. So this will be a cool addition that we can add. Well, as soon as I find it. Promise it's in here. There are too many of these. They keep adding them. Verbose name. There it is. Or is it verbose name plural? Verbose name, a human readable name for the object. Singular. So not that. Verbose name plural. So it defaults to verbose name plus S. So we can go in and we should be able to go to our model. And is that going to affect the migration? I don't remember. So let's stick to the convention just like we did in the factory of keeping the meta at the top. So you add this nested class. It's a little strange at first, to be honest, if you've never seen Django before, but it does grow on you of having this like class that's kind of a subclass in here that can access these extra things. It's to differentiate between fields that are part of your model and then fields that are about your model, if that makes sense. So we can create this name, which was verbose name plural. Verbose name plural. And we can set it to entries. Now if I save that, the worker reboot. What? Why did you not? Nope. Why didn't you pick up that change? Weird. Should have picked up the change, I think. We got it right. All right. for whatever reason, it didn't pick up the change. But now we have this meta attribute. I'm curious. I'm going to run make migrations again. See if adding a meta attribute shouldn't cause a new migration. Oh, dang it! It did. Boo. Well, we haven't committed that yet. So let's do this. We haven't even created a migration yet. So actually, this is good. What do you do when you want to undo migrations? So one way we could do this, there's a bunch of steps we could take. We could say that we want to migrate. And just pretend that there were some database changes in there that actually modified tables. You could back this out. And so you can migrate down by saying manage, migrate. And then what you have to do is you give the Django app you want to modify and then the migration number you want to go down to. So you say migrate, and then we would say entries. And if I'm already at 2 now, it just applied 2. If I wanted to go back to 1, I'd say 0001, and it says unapplying. Now, what's going to be harder though is if I say 0000, I don't think this works. Yeah. So how do you go back like to the very beginning as if the entries app never existed? And for that, there's a special keyword here of 0. So that will undo the initial migration. So now that we've undone the initial migration, we can go into the journal entries migrations directory and we can remove all of those migrations. Because I kind of want my migrations to at least be clean initially and not have a bunch of like confusing little minor changes tacked on. So I'm going to remove those and I'm going to do a make migrations. It's going to make a new 0001 migration. And let's go check it out. Let's see how it's different. Oops. So the only difference, does it even show up in here? Okay. It's included this as an options thing. So the other option is you could have gone in and if you'd known what to do, you could have added this yourself, or you could pulled it from the second migration and deleted it. I am very wary of modifying migration files directly. Sometimes you have to, especially if you're doing a data migration, which we're not going to talk about this evening, but as a certain type of thing that whenever you need to run some Python code to do some certain checking at migration time, that's when you would need to modify a migration file. But if you're purely adding tables or columns, like I just generally don't like modifying these by hand. Okay, so we're back in business. We should have it shouldn't complain at us when we load this page. And let's see, we've got, whoops. Oh, it did. Did I not migrate? Boo. All right, well, that's what happens when you don't migrate. So we've got our new migration, but I didn't actually apply it again. So now we're back. Now we should be back in business where the database table exists within the local SQLite database. And so let's start this up again. Refresh this. And you can see there are no entries here. So let's talk a little bit about what John was commenting on a little earlier. And we'll say, hello world, as our inaugural entry in here. And we can set this to today. And here's the challenge. So John was pointing out earlier that by default, this will make a dropdown. In local dev mode, that's not bad because there's only these testing accounts, and even these are no longer applicable because I fixed the test settings. So if I destroyed my local database, it'd be like 1 user. In the real setting, assuming that I have lots of people who sign up over time, this list is going to get longer and longer. Django is going to try to load all of them. And that is not optimal. You could do it for a while, but at some point it literally will load any user you had. So if 1 million people try Journey Inbox, there would be a million things to select from, which would be completely unusable. So we can go to one of the options, and we're now on the meta page. Let's go back to the admin section. And there's a field that's called raw. raw ID fields. Yeah. So we want this raw ID fields option. And what that will do is instead of using that drop down, it'll say pick a number. And it'll give you a little like little magnifying glass next to the side. You know what? Let's just go see it. So let's go to our admin page. And we want to add the raw ID fields. And I thought that used to be a tuple, but that documentation looked like it was a list. Maybe they fixed all these so they didn't have to be tuples anymore. I think once upon a time they had to be tuples. I don't remember. So then we can put in here user as part of our set of raw ID fields. I'm also a little bummed that this does not seem to be refreshing when there's changes detected. So something is going on there. It's not cool. So like even if I refresh this, it's still that. Really not cool. We might need to poke at that later. Not tonight. It's getting too late for that. But so now we've got this, and something's weird with the UI there. I don't know why this has been nudged up. That looks like a bug, if anything. But you can put in the particular ID. But if you don't know the IDs, you click this little button. It gives you a little pop-up that is like a sub-page of all the users. And from here, you can select the user you want. So I could select Matt, and that's ID 1 in this development table. And go back and fill this in. Hello world. And we'll select today. And then when we save, we now have an entry. Okay, so this looks kind of like garbage, though. If we saw a table of entries that was all entry object 1, like that's probably the ID of the entry, that is really not informative. And the reason for that is that there's two ways you can correct this. Way number 1, you can use something called list display. So this is the list view of the admin page. And there is an option in the admin called list display. And it tells you, lets you define what fields you want to show if you want to have multiple. Like right now it's only showing the 1 because we didn't tell it to do anything. So we could do something like this. Well, let's try a couple of variants of this. Let's do list display, and we'll give it a list, and we want to show ID, and I want to show the user. Okay, so that refresh thing's gonna drive me bonkers. Really don't know why that's not working. So now here we go. We have an ID, and we have the user here, so you know whose entry it is. That's one way to do this. And it's probably the way I'll go with this, to be honest. Although it's a little small. Think on that for a minute. The other thing that I might want in here is the when column. Go ahead and put all 3 of them in there. So like, the only thing I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want to show the body, right? Like I'm not interested in looking at the content, but I am interested in like, oh, I remember I made a test entry on this date versus that date. I had this information I need to check. So we could do that. Refresh. What we got? So now we've got when. The downside of this approach is that the target is really small to like click on this thing. See? So that's one way. Let me see what, do they list some other stuff on here? Because if you don't set list display, the admin site will display a single column that is the stir representation of each object. The model, this default string representation, is the model name, word object, and then parentheses, and then the ID. That's why we saw entry object parentheses 1. So we could define the stir object to give that a better name. There's other ways you can set different fields here. So we could say a callable. So we could kind of customize this if we wanted to in this way. In fact, I don't know. Do I want to stir a string representation? No, you know what? This is fine. Again, this is not going to be like a super commonly used admin, so this is probably good enough. We can do find Matt, and we can find a when. The other thing that we might want here is there's some filtering options in the admin, and this is at this point I'm kind of like showing off cool stuff in the admin, but it is useful. So we could do a list filter, and I think if we do a list filter on the date on the when, it would give us a certain time filtering stuff. Might be wrong on that. Let's try it. There is a way to have like remember it's like a bar across the top that lets you like kind of hone in on a time range. I don't think list filter is what we want, but I'm gonna check it out, see what this is gonna do. If this just puts a bunch of dates on the side, that's definitely not what we want, because that would be hundreds and hundreds and be really useless. But let's see. Oh, cool. Oh, that's super cool. This is like not what I anticipated, but it is neat of saying like today, past 7 days, this month, this year. That's really cool. I like it. We'll keep that. Probably good enough. And then if I needed another filtering, there are other ways to do filtering stuff, but this is a decent enough admin interface for this. Yeah, I could define the string method. You're right, John. And that way I could use it like give a bigger target here to have something bigger to select, but I'm not going to bother. All right, so I think we finished that issue, right? We added the migration, we added the admin page, we have our first model. You saw how I did modeling, how I thought about modeling. Let's add all this. Let's run the tests to make sure that we still have full coverage. We do. It's not saying a lot when you only have 67 lines of code so far, but that's okay. We're growing into it. And then, well, let me run it with migrations flag, because that's different. Cool. Let's check out what we've got as our current change set. So way back then we corrected the naming on that stuff. We've got our new admin page here. We've got the apps configuration, migration itself, the model, the factory to use for the future stuff, the test of that factory, and then the settings change to include the entries app. And then we've got our new, let's look at our graph now. See how it looks different. Whoops, not that open. All right, cool. Yeah, this is starting to illustrate at least a little bit of what I meant of why we pick BT versus, so bottom to top versus top to bottom. Even that requires a reference point, so don't worry too much about it. But you can see that the core thing of Journey Inbox is going to be the user, and then it's going to have entries hanging off of it. So like the user owns some entries, and those are things here. So it'll go down below. Again, we'll have this abstract thing, which won't make a lot of sense because we'll never really be using that. There might be ways to trim that if we wanted to. It's not super important to trim it. But this is our current model set. And then when we get down to it, we'll have later on we'll have an account that will do like the status tracking with as we're checking stuff with Stripe and tracking does the person have an account in good standing that's either a trial or an active thing or deleted or soft deleted, and whatever statuses we decide upon. I'm feeling pretty good about things. If y'all have any questions, let's feel free to fire away. I'm going to start winding down here. I think we've done everything here. And let's think about, after this, what is going to be next. Not this evening. This is probably going to be about it for me this evening. But happy to take any questions you got. So let's see. Add entry model. That fixes, what is this, number 2? Number 3. Cool. By the way, if you don't mind, if you're still here to like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube stuff, that helps out. Helps me get found by others, and I just appreciate it. Also, I don't try and shill much, but if you want to support me on Patreon, you're welcome to do that. I have a Patreon. My handle over on Patreon is the same as it is here in GitHub, so it's MB Lehman. I think I set up the same tiers on YouTube. So if it's easier for you to support me on YouTube, if you'd prefer that, and you're interested, of course, in supporting me, you're welcome to do that. I've got some tiers that are there, and I'm trying to get better about like shouting out who my patrons are. I'm staring at a list over there. Let me go ahead and do that since they do support me. I do want to say thanks to Rupert, Andrew, Dragos, Ryan, Patrick, Fred, Aaron, Philip, Miguel, Shivan, and Monty. Those are our patrons that I got. Thank you all for your support. Help me buy like lights and monitors and help make the stream a little better. All right, before we close for the evening, let's think about what are we going to do next. We now have a core model. What was last with the auth setup? That was template stuff. I don't know that that's what we want to do next. Okay. We probably, if I'm looking at the list here, sending emails to users is great, but we need to actually be able to send them email. So we probably need to get to SendGrid configuration soon. I think that's going to be next time. So what we'll do is I need to sign up for a SendGrid account for Journey Inbox. I'll probably at this stage sign up just for the free tier because I don't need to be paying for it yet, but it'll be enough for us to test it out, to like do real tests, send real emails over their API and confirm if it's working or not. That's going to get us through some interesting hoops to jump through, because setting up email, while not insanely complex, is also not trivially easy either. There's configuration that we have to do with the DNS names. There's some like certain records that we have to attach to DNS in order to validate that emails that we're sending out are coming from the valid from our domain, and that they should trust us because we've connected SendGrid to our domain explicitly. And there's a certain trust connection you have to set up there, because think about it, like if you didn't have that trust connection, anybody could sign up for SendGrid and then start sending emails on behalf of Google.com. There's all sorts of ways that you could think about making nefarious stuff happen. And thankfully, lots of people have thought about that and set up configuration that works with the DNS system that we have to do in order to become a trustworthy sender. So we will walk through that configuration, test it out, make sure it works, see if there might be some things that I can and can't show you, I can't remember, but I will do my best to try and be as open as possible, except where some certain secrets occur. If there are secrets, I will describe everything. And once we have that test working, then I think we can move on to the actual sending of emails to users. That's a critical capability that we're going to need to actually be able to prompt and send out regularly. So that is that portion of the site. So I think that's going to end it for me this evening. Thank you all for joining in. I really appreciate the thoughtful conversation. Hopefully you learned something a bit this evening about modeling, and I will catch you next week. I should be here next week. I don't think I have any events going on, so we'll get back to it next week. Take care.